All right. Hey, my name is Starseed Bey. Today we're going to talk about time, Cronus, two Cronoses, and there's something else I titled this, but the zodiacs of time, the firmament. We're going to be talking about all this stuff and how it all ties into rituals on the planet as well. And it was bizarre, man. I mean, I could have still been doing research on all this stuff and just it just became a big old mess. I got like windows open up like crazy up here. So yeah, so the gist of it, we're gonna go ahead and talk about Cronus, the time one first, and then we'll go from there. Since a lot of us are learning that time is an illusion. We're also cursed. Well, I guess not cursed, but trapped by time. All right, so Cronus is a personification of time in pre-philosophy, whatever. Cronus governs chronological time, contrasted with other Greek words of time. Blah blah blah. Cronus was already confused with Cronus Saturn. Giving rise to Father Time, blah blah blah, and then you learn about Cronus is attached to the deity Ion. So Ion, and this is the interesting thing, which I'll get into here in a little bit. So Ion, the deity, is a Hellenistic deity associated with time, the orb or circle encompassing the universe. Keyword: the orb or circle encompassing the universe, meaning round. It's round, okay? And the zodiac, the time represented by the eon, is unbounded in contrast to Cronus as empirical time divided into past, present, and future. And this is what I kind of talked about in the previous live video, is that you can present yourself in sequences of timelines. So you have the child self, you'll have the teenage self, you'll have a young adult self, a mid-adult self, and then an old adult self, right? So past, present, and future, right? They're all divided, but they're all timelines. They really have no sense of time like we know, but it's just a moment that is created for itself or generated. So Cronus is an empirical time divided into past, present, and future. He is thus a god of eternity, associated with mystery religions concerned with the afterlife, such as the mysteries of Cybele, Denios, Ophoros. See, and the research can continue on after that. So I find that quite interesting, finding this god Ion and how he represents an orb or circle. You look up pictures of him, you'll see the same thing, but it comes up with the zodiac. So with the zodiac, this is where the firmament comes in, and where my theory is all the stars are just in our atmosphere alone, which is why we have the zodiac signs and things like that. And I was watching a video earlier, which is where I came across the six-starred pentagram, which is representation of David, which I'll talk about here in a little bit. Representation of David, as well as two pyramids, which also is representation of a clock. So you got let's see here. But yeah, so you got a representation of a clock, and I wrote on there the sun can go one way and the moon is another way, and time constantly fluctuates between that. But there's something that happens between that. It's the 13th hour, the 0 point. And I look up the word Tartarus, and it may not ring a bell to you guys, but there's a game called Persona 3. It talks about Tartarus, and I thought it was a planet or star or something, but I couldn't find anything other than in a game, which Tartarus. And this is where I came up with, or discovered 13. now 13 I discovered way beforehand, but when I played the game Persona, it kind of just started clicking from there. So 13 represents the 0 point, or that dark time, and we all go through it. There's definitely many theories about it, on how, say, around 2 o'clock, 2, 3 o'clock, or somewhere in that range, we'll wake up. We'll feel something different. We'll feel something different. And there's a couple things I've learned about it, is that it could be that if we have parasites in our body, it wakes us up during that time. But I find it rather weird that if it was parasites in our body, that they would wake us up at that time every time. That doesn't make any sense to me. But there's definitely something going on with that 13th hour. And then you do research on that there's 13 months, and it represents the moon cycles and things like that. So the zodiacs is an important role, and I didn't really realize just how important the zodiac signs were until doing more research. So with the zodiac signs being a representation of time, right? With the representation of time, this leads me to believe that there's something more going on with the firmament that is above us. So the world, regardless, is round. I mean, I'm not going to go into flat Earth thing, blah, 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 blah. But just imagine our Earth as a snow globe, okay? Our Earth is a snow globe. I kind of have a thing here. Our Earth is a snow globe, and it is Mother Gaia. And this is where Cronus is going to come in. So Gaia, the story with Gaia, Mother Earth, she is the mother to Cronus, which is Saturn. And this is where astrology and everything is going to come into play here. So the mother here is the protector of us. I don't know how to say it. She's just a mother. I'm not going to complicate myself here. So anyway, so we got the firmament with all these stars. So imagine these stars being also beings or entities that we're attached to in some way, shape, or form. Again, read the Testament of Solomon. I gotta definitely do a part 2 on that, because it's gonna kind of make more sense as we go further in. But these zodiac signs and these star sequences, they constantly move. So, we're taught that, the solar system and all the planets travel around in a certain way, in all these scenarios, as well as the stars moving based on the seasons, things of that nature, representing time. So what we see above is a representation of time. And the video I watched kind of chronicalized, I guess that'd be a good word, pinpoints in history, pinpoints in time. Our ancient ancestors showed us on rocks, and they did the best they could in writings and things of that nature, on trying to foretold on these signs in the sky, watching astrology, because the Bible itself is all about astrology. It's all about astrology, and this brings up the Titans as well, which I'm going to talk about here in just a little bit. There's many layers to these stories, but yeah, so with time itself, it's constantly looking at things. There's a thing I remember watching on Ancient Aliens. There was this rock that you look through, and it was a pinpoint of I don't remember if it was, I think it was the sun. And they use that to look at the sun. But now it's all unbalanced, because at that time the sun was perfectly aligned, but now it's no longer aligned, which generates the shift, or the pole shift, that we're talked about, that is coming here and there. And it just occurred to me, on how time works and how a clock works, that we hear the clicking, click, 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 click. And once it hit 12, you know, the old-fashioned times, you hit the final click, and then it just starts dinging. Ding, ding, ding. And you hear that, right? And that kind of reminds me of like earthquakes. Or like tremors, birth, you know, giving birth. You know, we've been talking about that, at least I've been talking about it, but other people have been talking about it as well, and how Mother Earth, you know, Earth itself is going through birth pains. But not just Earth, but the universe has talked about it a lot. And this, like I said, does this mean with the universe's birth pains and the zodiac signs, does that mean that it's just the firmament changing? You know, is this what we have been not paying attention to, is the importance of the firmament and the earth? You know, we're so focused on discovering what is outside the earth and the universe and things like that, because, you know, we can see the planets, right? And, you know, are the planets aligned with the firmament? I don't think so. I don't want to say they are. I think the stars are all trapped inside the firmament, but I don't think the planets are. And to me, I believe the planets are actually big ships that harvest different life forms. So I think this is where all the stories of these Titans come from. So yeah, it's bizarre, man. It's bizarre. But yeah, so I really feel that the firmament is going to start to become more and more addressed, and be made more known. This also comes along with Antarctica being the main circle point. The Book of Enoch talks about Antarctica and talks about the Titans and the fallen angels. And this is where the fallen angels can tie into the stars above the firmament, but it can also tie into the planets. And Saturn and Jupiter are the two biggest planets that are being taken notice throughout the centuries, and where the rituals are coming in. And I got this all written down, but Jupiter and Saturn and all these rituals are happening for some weird reason, but it has to do with energy, it has to do with synergy, and then uprise of beings. And that I didn't discover yet, but this is definitely going to tie into some interesting things. So anyway, so yeah, the firmament and the zodiac signs and the stars in the sky, they have their own story, and they're changing and fluctuating. If you go out there, you notice that there's very few stars out in the sky. I remember there used to be tons and tons and tons of stars out in the sky, tons of stars, but now there's very few. And it used to be, you know, hey, if you had lights outside, yeah, of course you're not going to see that many. But, you know, I've went and camped out, and there just isn't that many stars out there. It just isn't. So there's something definitely different. I mean, I don't know if it means that, you know, maybe that the stars we see now is a holographic. Again, we come across the moon being holographic, perhaps artificial in some way. You know, with technology that we have nowadays, maybe they've cloaked the whole sky. Maybe that's what these chemtrails are. You know, we don't know, because I mean, when I was a kid, these chemtrails were not around. They weren't. Chemtrails really didn't pick up till after 2001. And this brings up another interesting thing. I looked into this thing called the Great Conjunction. Again, I'll post the link that I got some of this information from, because definitely we learn from each other. That's one of the key things, is that we all learn from each other. We got to put all these pieces of the puzzle together, because it's amazing. But this thing called a Great Conjunction is a conjunction of Jupiter and Saturn. The last Great Conjunction took place on May 31st, 2000, a year before 2001. And something very strange happened during that time in 2001. While the next Great Conjunction will happen in late December 2020, which conveniently is December 21st. And what happened in 2012, we were also focused on the 21st of that, which definitely I had personal experiences during that time. It just was a starting point to let us be aware that there's a great conjunction again happening in 2020. And these great conjunctions happen regularly every 18 to 20 years as a result of combined 12-year orbital period of Jupiter around the Sun and Saturn's 30-year period as well. The 2000 conjunction fell within mere weeks after both had passed conjunction with the Sun, blah, blah, blah. So Jupiter and Saturn have a huge pinpoint in this change we're going through. And this is where so many people now are worshiping Saturn. Satan. What other names are there? The bright morning star also comes up as well. The bright morning star can also represent Venus, as well as Sirius, the dog star. Okay, so Sirius, the dog star. Now Sirius is under the Earth, at least that's what we're told anyways, is under the Earth, so it's the dog star. And you reverse dog, you get God. And in the English Bible, we're taught to worship God, which in reverse is dog. So that means that we're worshiping Sirius, and it's a big mess. It's a big mess. It astonishes me and amazes me, and how we fall for all of these stories, and we just assume that they're real just because human doctrine, just because of human doctrine. This is why I like to do deeper research and find the root words or origins, and I'm sure there's origins for all of these. But yeah, so let's talk about Cronus, Saturn. All right. So his mythology is in ancient myth, whatever. Cronus invade the power of his father, the ruler of the universe, Uranus. Uranus. I don't know. I think that's how you really say it. Drew the enmity. I think it's Uranus, but it's Uranus. There's the jokes right there, man. Anyways, the enmity of Cronus's mother Gaia, which is Earth, when he hid the gigantic youngest children of Gaia. Okay, so Cronus was trying to hide the children of Gaia, which is interesting, which leads me to believe maybe the stars? I don't know. The 100-handed, I have no idea what that word is, and the one-eyed Cyclops. And this is interesting too, because on top of Saturn, there is a tetra, the five-pointed tetra something, above Saturn, okay? That would be the one-eyed Cyclops. And they talk about Tartarus. They talk about Tartarus in this mythology. And I'll talk about that here in a second. So, the one-eyed Cyclops and Tartarus, so that they would not see the light, Gaia created a great stone sickle and gathered together Cronus and his brothers to persuade them to castrate Uranus. Now Uranus, let me read about him real quick. Uranus, oops, that's the planet. I gotta open up here somewhere. If not, I can look it up real quick. There we go. All right, so Uranus is the Greek god personifying the sky. He's also a Roman mythology known as Cetus, whatever. But Uranus, or Father Sky, which translation Father Sky, was the son and husband of Gaia, Mother Earth. So that'd be a representation to me personally. Father Sky, the husband of Gaia, would be. It wouldn't be the firmament. It would be what surrounds each planet. What surrounds each planet. Because if we got the mother, Earth, which is interesting because Earth is really like a pinpoint, but it could just be just because we live on Earth right now. Father Sky was the son and husband of Gaia, Mother Earth. According to whatever, Uranus was convinced by Gaia alone, but other sources author as his father. Uranus and Gaia were the parents of the first generation of Titans. This is the interesting thing. Uranus and Gaia were the parents of the first generation of Titans and the ancestors of most of the Greek gods. But no cult addressed directly to Uranus survived in classical times. Blah, blah, blah. And Uranus does not appear among the usual themes. Blah, 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 blah. So basically the story is that Uranus, the father Sky, which is also a planet, Uranus and Gaia gave birth to the Titans, and this is where it leads me to believe, belie, okay? So it just is a theory that what about if these planets are the Titans that are talked about, right? Now, granted, we have, 9 planets in the solar system, so it wouldn't really represent the 7 archangels, but there's definitely a hint of that in there, and it's multi-layered. So you'd have the planets, right? The bodies, the embodiment of these planets, because I mean we live on Earth, right? So we have life and energy, things of that nature on this planet. So our other planets have the same things. You know, science tries to make it sound like these planets are unlivable, but just on Earth alone, we've learned, that fish live in 2,000 degree temperature, right? They found some deep underground water that's like 2,000 degrees, and living life forms live in there. So this throws science out the doorway, that life on other planets, they would just be breathing and living differently. That's just how it is. So yeah, so I found it rather interesting that Uranus and Gaia are the parents of the first generation of Titans, the planets that we see, which is interesting, really interesting. So anyway, so let's get back to Cronus here. I got pages open all over the place. All right. Where is it at? Cronus. There we go. All right. So we'll get back to Cronus here. All right. So only Cronus. Blah blah blah. All right. When Uranus met with Gaia, Cronus attacked him with the sickle, castrating him and casting his testicles into the sea. I know it sounds weird, but this could be a representation of Saturn's seeds, or maybe this is where the fallen angels come into play. So castrating his testicles, and obviously testicles, semen, blah blah blah. Fallen angels falling to Earth. Okay. Casting his testicles into the sea. And this also is interesting because it talks about in Revelations about wormwood, right? The meteor wormwood, right? And wormwood can be a representation of, worms could be seeds, or parasites or something like that, or semen. You don't know. I tell you, man, this is weird stuff, man. So into the sea from the blood that spilled out from Uranus and fell upon the earth, right? Excuse me, Uranus. Cronus actually cut off Uranus's testicles, and the cast into the sea from blood that spilled from Uranus and fell upon the earth. So the blood spilled from Uranus and fell upon the earth, right? The seeds of Uranus, or the sky. Uranus. I'm sure you guys, whoever is watching this, is going to crack up over that one. Uranus fell upon the Earth. And let me look this up real quick. We got 3 different things were produced, so let's look these up real quick. Hopefully I don't get lost in here. Alright, so the first one, oh, actually, that's the giants, conveniently enough. Alright, so Uranus is blood spilled upon the Earth, creating the giants, okay, creating the giants. Olympic gods, blah, 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 blah. Man, see, that still leaves a gap, though. Still leaves a gap. But that definitely ties in. Let's see what we got here. Well, it says according to this, Wikipedia, I mean, you can only take it with a grain of sand with this stuff, but the gigantes, or giants, heavily armed iron giants in form. They had snakes for legs. In later traditions, the giants were often confused with other opponents, blah blah blah. The vanquished giants were said to be buried under volcanoes. Oh, the vanquished giants were said to be buried under volcanoes and to be the cause of volcanic eruptions and earthquakes. Interesting. Interesting. There's definitely other things that are talked about with volcanoes if you do research. Volcanoes could have been created by giants as a way of their own trash, right? To get rid of trash. And then we also tie into that the world was silicone based, and that life was totally different. And once it became carbon based, silicone died and became petrified. So if there were any giants on the world, they would have became petrified and formed all the rocks that we see now. So there may never have been rocks until these titans were turned to stone and laid to rest, which is why now we have all these hills and mountains and things of that nature, as well as interesting carvings in rocks themselves. Because I mean, if these silicone-based trees were trees, well, obviously you could carve into them pretty easy. But once they were turned into, turned to stone, it made scientifically impossible to make the kind of sculptures they did in those stones at that time. It's huge. It's huge. So yeah, I found it rather interesting. They talk about the volcano eruptions being caused by the giants. So, all right, let's get out of that. Get back to the other one. So now I'm kind of interested to see what these other ones are. So we got another one. It's really hard to pronounce with this. Something about Erinys, also known as the Furies, or female deities of vengeance. Interesting. So that would mean that Uranus' blood formed the giants and created vengeance upon the earth. They created vengeance upon the earth. Which also ties into the Testament of Solomon and all those many creatures as well. The firmament, the stars. Man, this is weird. They were sometimes referred to as infernal, like fire goddesses. So they were goddesses. A formulaic oath in the, man, I hate these words. The under earth, let's see. That under earth take vengeance on men, whosoever hath sworn a false oath. Suggests that they are an embodiment of the act of self-cursing containing an oath, and we know oaths are. Let's see, and then talks about other writers. And there's no real word hell. They talk about hell, but it's really just the underworld. So they're talking about the underworld, which could represent Sirius. It could also represent Saturn, as well as Tartarus. I think that was pretty much about it. Let's see, when Cronus castrated his father, yes. The crest of, let's see, and it says on here, emerged from the drops of blood which fell on the earth, from Uranus's blood. And then I got to read about the other one. Was born from the crest of sea foam, according blah blah blah. All right. So anyway, so Uranus's blood created goddesses of vengeance, creating sin. So to me, if you view ego and ego gets out of control, our personalities, our personas, it generates sin. It generates that hardening the heart or creating that vengeance. And that definitely involves the female aspect as well. But we all have vengeance within us if we allow it to take control over us. So yeah. Interesting. Alright, and then the last one. Oh yeah, here we go. Man, there's quite a few of these. That's why I was trying to stop doing research, but man, it continues on. Alright, so the other one was Malia was usually considered to be the nymphs of the ash tree, whose names they shared. Man, that would be a representation of the dead or spirits, or the souls. So basically generating the souls of humanity. Huh, interesting. So yeah, Uranus's blood created this ash tree, whose names they shared. Huh, interesting. Alright, and the last one. So those are produced on the Earth. So we got giants, vengeance, which is persona as an ego, and the ashes, which are spirits, representation of spirits or beings that fell to the earth. That's bizarre, dude. Let's see, the testicles produced a white foam, okay, from which the goddess, and we'll read this one. Basically, it's just telling you that it gave birth. Bizarre stuff, man. She was identified. Oh, here we go. Look at this. So, Aphrodite. So that was the word Aphrodite. What? Alright, so let me see if I get this right. So we got the giants, we got vengeance, and then we got the ash tree that were produced. And then onto the earth. And then Aphrodite's emerged. Okay, Aphrodite's emerged from this. So Uranus and Gaia gave birth to Aphrodite's. So Aphrodite's is Venus. So wow, that's interesting. That I didn't come up with on this, but I don't think I did. Yeah, but Venus is a representation of the bright morning star, which is also Lucifer, which is a woman. So Aphrodite's would be the bright morning star. And this is also where Mary might come in as well. We have Mary. And if you do research with Mary, there is some religious churches, the big name ones, that hate Mary, that hate Venus, or hate Aphrodite, because they want it to be all about the male. They want it to be about Saturn. It is all about Saturn, and you're going to learn a lot about that, and why they do these rituals. This is bizarre stuff, man. She's identified with planet Venus, which is named after the Roman goddess Venus. Let's see here. Let's see, a cognate of the East Semitic goddess Ishtar, whose cult was based on the Sumerian cult of Inanna, which then we got Anu and Epsu. We got Epsu energy, which can also be defined as a Uranus as well. But I'll have to talk about that later. Wow. She was also known as the goddess of prostitution. So would that mean that that would generate lust on the earth? So therefore, a lust was created upon the earth as well from Uranus's blood. Wow, that's crazy, huh? So a lust was born, and her name was Aphrodite. Wow. That's crazy, man. That's crazy. Oh, wow, we got some stuff going on here, too. Hey, how's it going, Lori? And Christine's joining us as well. We also got CJ. Alright, so where were we at here? So, yeah, so Aphrodites. Wow, that's crazy, man. Alright, so let's continue on with Cronus's story. Alright, so for this, Uranus threatened vengeance and called his sons Titanes. I don't know what that word is, meaning the straining ones. Okay, so Uranus summoned these spirits, the straining ones, the source of the word Titans. But this etymology is disputed. So basically, it's don't really know what it is, but it's the straining ones. For overstepping their boundaries and daring to commit such an act, an alternate blah 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 through the Titan Alphina. Doing so, he released the world. Wow. Okay. So for overstepping their boundaries, daring to commit such an act. Let's see. In an alternate version of this myth, a more benevolent Cronus overthrew the wicked Titan Ophion. In doing so, he released the world from bondage and for a time ruled it justly. So there's stories out there that make Cronus sound awesome. So there's two stories, and there's always two stories with everything, right? So maybe Saturn is good, and we're taught that Saturn is bad. Don't know. And I'm going to talk about the Great Conjunction again here in a little bit, because maybe this ties into that. After dispatching Uranus, Cronus re-imprisoned the... Oh boy, we got some more big words going on here. Let me see what this is real quick. Also called the Centimayans. Looks like 3 giants with incredible strengths and surpassed all the Titans whom they overthrew. Oh, okay. Alright, so this big word, hecto something, is a representation of storms and hurricanes, right? So we got to realize our ancestors and how they depicted this stuff. They said giants, right? Giants, but maybe giants are different forms. So they represent storms and hurricanes, right? So let's go back to Cronus. And after dispatching Uranus, Cronus re-imprisoned the Ignorus, which is... So Cronus created what I just said, hurricanes and big, just big storms, and the Cyclops, and set the dragon Campy to guard them. All right, let's see what Campy is. Campy. This is nuts, man. Campy means to twist and to bend. Interesting. To twist and to bend means breaking through. Interesting. To twist and to bend. He and his sister Ray took the throne of the world as king and queen. The period in which Cronus ruled was called the Golden Age. As the people of the time had no need for laws or rules. which is what we are under right now. Everyone did the right thing and immorality was absent. No, actually, we're not in that time. Excuse me. So laws and rules were not needed because everybody was balanced, was well balanced. That kind of contradicts itself there. Alright, so Cronus learned from Gaia and Uranus that he was destined to be overcome by his own sons, just as he had overthrown his father. As a result, although he seared the gods, Demetrius, Astia, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon by Re, he devoured them all, and this is where Cronus is known for devouring his children. And then this is where in rituals, this is where the children come in. Rituals and the children, because they are sacrificing the children. And you can read this in the Bible as well. Okay, they sacrifice their children to Saturn because they're scared of Saturn, or they're scared of Cronus. They're scared of Cronus, so they're worshiping Cronus, which is what's happening now. They're worshiping Saturn, and I'll get into that here in a little bit. So, he devoured them all. He devoured his children as soon as they were born to prevent the prophecy. Okay, to prevent the prophecy. Where does prophecy again happen? It talks about that in the Bible, and throughout the Bible, they talk about it as well. And the God, or in the Bible in the Old Testament, wanted no male child to be born, so they killed every male child, so then the prophecy would not be fulfilled. All intertwined, man. It's bizarre. And this is where Zeus, where many people feel that Yahshua is also Zeus. So when the sixth child being a key word there, Zeus was born, Re sought Gaia to devise a plan to save them, and to eventually get retribution on Cronus for his acts against his father and children. Re secretly gave birth to Zeus in Crete, which also this can tie into Revelations, where the woman gave birth in a cave, I believe, and then this dragon was trying to take her. So it's all intertwined. I tell you, man, astrology is all in that Bible, man. It's bizarre. And handed Cronus a stone wrapped in swaddling cloths, also known as the Imphilos stone, which he promptly swallowed, thinking that it was his son. Let's look up this stone real quick. See what it is. Where'd it go? Oh, well, look at that. Alright, so the Imphilos stone is a religious stone or artifact. The word represents the navel. And obviously, what's the navel? The belly button, which is our cord that sustains life for us within our mother's womb. Interesting. Let's see. In Greek lore, Zeus sent two eagles across the world to meet at its center, the navel of the world. Boom! Read that again. Zeus sent two eagles across the world to meet at its center, the navel of the world, the center point, Antarctica. Okay, Antarctica. And you'll read that in the book of Enoch. There's something in Antarctica, and I'm telling you, man. And I'll bring this up real quick. I really feel, since Antarctica, we can't explore any farther past Antarctica, okay? There's lots of proof that we cannot explore farther out. And this is where I feel that if you look at the globe that we have, right, our map, we flatten the map, right? So if Antarctica is on the top of the world, we flatten it, that's going to make Antarctica in the middle. That's going to be the navel of the world. Or also it can be the Garden of Eden. It can also be the key to the underworld, going into the underworld. But there's something there. There's something there, man. And what I was saying is that I believe that there is a whole part of the world we have yet to discover because we're not allowed to go that way. You know, whether there's a barrier protection, you know, maybe the sorcerers and the warlocks back in the day, maybe they put some kind of barrier where we couldn't go any farther. And there's also a lot of historical pinpoints on that as well. So yeah, definitely do research on that. But yeah, so I found this really interesting that Zeus says he sent 2 eagles across the world to meet at its center, the navel of the world. Wow. Marking the center where erected in several places about the Mediterranean Sea. The most famous of those was at Delphi. It's also the name of the stone given to Cronus. Blah, blah, blah. So also representation of the Mediterranean Sea. And again, I talked about the sea before in my previous videos, and also talks about that in the Book of Solomon, and how these spirits of beings, and there's even a story in, I believe it's in Ezekiel, I think, about Satan coming from underworld and to the earth, traveling back and forth, right? It also can be a representation of the sea. And we also have a lot of phenomenons with UFOs coming out of the sea. So there's a lot of stuff going on in the Mediterranean Sea, or the sea itself. Crazy stuff, man. Crazy stuff. Crazy stuff. All right, hold on here. I can... There we go. Alright, so let's get back to Cronus there. Wow. Tell you, man, this stuff's all tying together. It's insane. Alright, after dispatching Uranus, blah, blah, blah. We already read that. Alright, Cronus learned from Gaia and Uranus that he was destined to be overthrown. Ray suddenly gave birth to... and then he ate the stone. Alright, so Ray kept Zeus hidden in a cave, a Mount Ade, according to some version of the story. He was then raised by a goat named Amalthea. And this is where the goat character comes in as well. I'm telling you, man, that's all that people, a lot of the secret societies are worshipping is Saturn. And this is where the goat being comes in. And with the goat being, this is also the sign of time. You know, he's like this, right? There's also pictures of the Jesus character that has this pinpoint time, or the sickle, right? Or the sickle. So, interesting stuff. So, he was then raised by a goat named Amalthea. Let's see what that is. Amalthea can also be Pan as well, if you look into Pan. He was bizarre. But, let's see. So, this goat is mostly frequently mentioned as a foster mother of Zeus. It's a tender goddess, is clarion presence as a goat who nurtured the infant god in a cave. Oh, so basically, it could just been that our ancestors just called her a goat, meaning a foster mother. So goat must represent foster mother. So maybe their representation of using the goat, since we're not smart enough, right? So since the masses aren't smart enough to figure it out, they use the goat to hide that that they worship Cronus or Saturn. So this is where a goat would be representation as a foster mother. So if you have a foster mother, call her goat one day, and she'll be like, "What?" Be like, "Well, in Greek mythology, goat meant foster mother." So, interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Let's see what we got going on in here. Let's see. Christine says Hollow Earth, and you are correct. Awesome. Interesting. Some bizarre stuff. All right, let's get back into this. Alright, so let's see what we got here. Well, a company of Chorites, looks like armed male dancers, shouted and clapped their hands to make enough noise to mask the baby's cry. Distractions. Well, let's look that up and see what that means. I mean, it says male dancers. Maybe there's another key thing into this. So it looks like they distracted Cronus and they worshipped a goddess named Cybele with drumming and dancing. So it's just a representation of worshiping, just to distract, they made it look like they were worshiping something they're not. Once again, there comes into that church concept as well, that we're taught in America that God is good, but if you do research and learn about Sirius, the dog star, so like I said, dog reversed to God, worshiping Sirius as well as Saturn. It's insane, man. It's insane. Alright, so distracted Cronus. Other versions of the myths of Zeus raised by a nymph named Adamantia. Okay. Who hid Zeus by dangling him by a rope from a tree. Oh, alright. So read this. Who hid Zeus by dangling him by a rope from a tree. Now again, if you go in to do research on the crucifixions, right? Christ was hung on a cross, right? Christ was hung on a cross. Now, if you do further research, you'll learn that they actually flipped the people upside down, and they were hung upside down, and that's how they were. So it looked like that's what they did here. So Zeus was dangling what? Who hid Zeus by dangling him by a rope from a tree so that he was suspended. Also, he was suspended between the earth, the sea, and the sky. What? Alright, let me read this again. Who hid Zeus by dangling him by a rope from a tree so that he was suspended between the earth, the middle, the sea, the bottom, and the sky above, all which were ruled by his father Cronus. And that's a different version, I guess. That's a different version. Does that mean that Zeus's energy is suspended around us? So Cronus rules the earth, but the prophecy child, Zeus, Yeshua, Christ energy, is suspended within the earth. So we have the opportunity to tap into that Christ energy, that Zeus energy, to break free from Cronus's vengeance that is upon the earth, which is also a representation of Satan as well. And I also got that as well. We got Satan, which is a noun as a chief evil spirit or the great adversary of humanity, as well as the devil. So that's where that comes into play. Man. Alright, so what else we got here? Prisoners raised when he had dangling upon the earth. Once he had grown up, Zeus used an emetic given by him. Let's see. Once he had grown up, Zeus used a emetic. Let's look up that word. Let me see where I'm at. I'm going to go ahead and make my video be part 1. I'll stay live here on Facebook. So, alright, so this will be part 1. I'm going to turn this off and then I'll re-record for part 2. Because with YouTube, it's starting to get real trippy where you don't really know how much time you actually have. So I don't want to be making a 2-hour video and then find out I can't post it. That would suck. So, alright, so I'm going to push stop and then I'll push record again.